What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Artists of Data Science podcast, the only self-development podcast for data scientists. Our guest today is an international keynote speaker and innovation specialist who brings data to life and life to data. He's earned advanced degrees in secondary education and spent the first 10 years of his career as a high school teacher. In the early 90s, he changed his career focus to IT, which started off a successful 25-year run at North Carolina State University as a business intelligence specialist, before eventually moving to the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, where he serves as a team lead and senior systems analyst. More recently, though, he's been named Chief Technology Officer at a North Carolina corporation. Along the way, he's become a much sought after resource and a data analytics and visualization expert. So please help me in welcoming our guest today, a specialist in efficiency and process improvement, Dr. Joe Perez. Dr. Joe, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come onto the show today. Appreciate having you here.
Absolutely, Harpreet. Thank you so much for inviting me, sir. It's my honor to be on your program.
And it's my absolute pleasure to have you. It's the second time. Actually, this might be the third time where we've kind of quote unquote shared the stage. We were, I guess, stage mates at Kate Strachan's event, and then also Disco Virtual.
Yes, sir.
First time we're talking 101, man. So I'm excited to have you here. So before we get into the data and all that and all that stuff there, let's get to know the man behind the data.
All right.
So talk to us a little bit about where you grew up and what it was like there.
Sure. Well, let's see. I grew up in a little town called Sanford, Florida. Well, it's not so little anymore. I mean, it's kind of big. It's got an international airport now. You know, when I was a kid, the airport that was there, oh, good heavens, it was only, it was less than 2 miles away from my house. It was still an active naval base. And then they decommissioned it. And now years later, they've refurbished it and turned it into an international airport. My little bitty hometown that had probably just not much more than 10, 12,000 people. And oh gosh, now it's probably 60, 70,000 people, which, you know, I mean, that's not huge by the millions of people that live in LA and, you know, the other big cities of the US, but it's still, it was still a nice, small town. It was nice to play outside with my friends when I was a little kid. We'd do it till the street lights would come on, you know. The good old days. I mean, if we needed water, you know, we'd like walk over to our neighbor's house and drink out of their garden hose, you know, where you could do that and not be afraid of getting some stupid virus or something, you know. And then when we get hot, we'd, you know, come over to my house and jump in my parents' pool. So I'd walk to school. I'd ride my bike to the grocery store. I didn't have a cell phone. Nobody had cell phones. You know, they weren't even invented until 30 years later or something, you know. Mow the lawn for $1, maybe 2 or 3, I forget. And then we'd watch the Flintstones and Johnny Quest and Star Trek. First run, now not reruns, but Star Trek in living color when I was a small boy. I'd do that with my mom and dad after supper. Yeah, who would have thought? Cartoons at night, you know, Johnny Quest. We love Johnny Quest. So, I mean, you know, times were different. People were different. The pace was slower. The days seemed longer. And I suppose people seemed a little nicer. So that's where I grew up. Small town, USA.
I absolutely love that. So I grew up in Sacramento, California. State capital of California, Northern California. And California's just pace of life is so busy. And I've been here in Winnipeg for about 7 years now. Wife and I just had a baby a year ago. He's turning 1 year on May 8th, right?
Yeah, so I remember those days when my kids were that little.
Oh man, it's he's been doing some crazy stuff in the middle of the night, waking us up and causing havoc. So,
well, take it from experience. It does get better after a few years. Okay,
a few years.
Take heart. Take heart. Well, maybe a few months, and then it gets worse for a little while, and then it gets better.
Yeah, but yeah, it's cool, man. So I think about, like, you know, living here in Winnipeg, small town. That what you're describing, like, I would absolutely love that for my kid, right? Just Yeah, world's a different place now, man. But speaking about, the world being a different place as times change, as we move to the future, things change.
Right.
So when you're back, in your high school years, what did you think the future would look like for you, and how has that changed?
Oh, oh boy. Well, a lot of things changed and a lot of things didn't. Like, okay, for instance, that sounds like I'm being ambiguous here, but um, even when I was back in high school, I honestly, I always loved to teach. I always loved to communicate. I mean, even back then, I thought I'd be a teacher, which, as a matter of fact, I did end up being an educator for 10 years. And then in a university setting for another 25 years after that, as you already mentioned in your very kind and gracious introduction, I might say. But, in a way, I'm still a teacher because I still have a passion for sharing information. I really enjoy seeing the lights come on in the eyes of my students, if you will, or I suppose I can say audience, as a speaker, because it really gets my motor going when I see that they get what I'm saying. I mean, it's that way at work also. Because part of my responsibility as a senior systems analyst is providing instruction and direction for others, both on my own team and elsewhere. So that part of, as you put it, what I imagined life would be like, that part hadn't changed because, again, it's part of what I always wanted to be, what I always wanted to do. Now, what I think has changed is since I grew up during the heyday of the NASA space program in the late 60s. I mean, I imagined that by the time I'd grow up, why I'd have a flying car like George Jetson or something, right? We'd have a permanent moon base like they did in many of the TV shows that would and movies and stuff that would depict us as having some sort of permanent station on the moon. I mean, we might have it, just government isn't telling us. I don't know, but I don't think we do. But we'd be flying around the solar system, or oh man, we'd all have jetpacks. You just put it on your back, hit the button, and boom, you can go fly. That kind of thing. Now, obviously, those kinds of things, didn't materialize, and it wasn't just limited to the crazy '60s. I mean, even in the mid '80s, I was already well past high school, and past college by then. Remember the Back to the Future movies 30 something years ago. I mean,
my absolute favorite set of movies.
Right. You're thinking that we'd be having flying cars in 30 years. So, went from the Jetsons to a hover conversion or whatever, right? Whatever they call it, Jaws 22 or whatever it was, and hoverboards and self-drying jackets and things. So, and that, most of that hadn't come to pass, but the flip phone, well, Captain Kirk had the first flip phone, right, with the communicator on Star Trek. So, hey, Gene Roddenberry got something right. But another thing that I imagined back in high school, I figured that by the time I grew up, I'd be married and have a couple of kids. And what's really cool is, to my utter amazement, beyond my wildest dreams. I mean, that's really come to pass. I mean, I am just so grateful that God's given me absolutely the best, most amazing wife that I could ever possibly want. I mean, way more than I deserve. Two absolutely phenomenal boys. You have your little one who's a year old. I remember those days. Mine are grown up. They've grown to be exceptional young men. I'm so very proud of them. Excuse me. Really proud of them. And I want them to be proud of me too. But one thing that has surprised me though is the amazing opportunities that have literally dropped in my lap as far as, speaking at conferences. I mean, even as little as recently as 3 years ago, I never dreamed that I would be averaging more than 25 speaking engagements every year. It's like I'm amazed, humbled, excited, and extremely grateful, all at the same time, all those emotions kind of mixed together. So grateful for everything God's provided. Now, of course, I'm not implying that, I'm looking at the world through rose-colored glasses or that I'm free of problems. I mean, yeah, there's plenty of those. I mean, that's part of what we all call life, But in spite of whatever good, bad, or ugly, anything that comes my way, hey, I'm just thankful to be alive and grateful, grateful for what I have, rather than complaining about what I don't have. I think it's better to be positive and focus on what I do have. So I know I kind of strayed off the topic a little bit, but that those are the kinds of things that you imagine as a kid that I'm just so grateful and thankful, many of which have come true. And I'm probably just as grateful that a lot of the things that I imagined perhaps have not come true, like the flying cars.
Oh, man, like Back to the Future is my absolute favorite movie.
Yeah, I love that.
Definitely waiting for 2015 to roll around with those flying cars, but that didn't happen. But yeah, that's awesome that you've got so many speaking engagements every year. I think that's you're definitely a busy man all over the place with these engagements. So help my audience here figure out how to become better public speakers. Talk to us about this dynamic speaking and these 4 essential E's. Dynamic speaking.
So, sure thing, Harp. I love talking about this, because in my experience, I mean, and again, I don't mean that to sound arrogant. I mean, I've just been at it for a long time. You give a trained monkey a hammer, and sooner or later he's going to feel, So I'd like to think that maybe I'm a little bit smarter than a monkey, But over decades of experience, I mean, I've been doing this for more than 30 years, almost 40 now. So the speaking isn't new. What is new is that in the last 3 years, as I alluded to a couple minutes ago, is doing it at conferences that are outside of my place of work or my city, my local area. And again, we're talking part of that, before the pandemic hit, where we're all in our local area until we get back to in-person events. But as far as dynamic speaking is concerned, in the experience that I've had, the conferences that I've attended, the places that I've gone as both an attendee and a speaker, I get to sit and listen to a lot of people. And, people get tired of being subjective to what I'm going to call death by PowerPoint. Speakers that just drone on and on and on without providing anything that's actionable, without providing anything that's practical to what's applicable to what they're doing. I mean, I might as well be sitting there and watching grass grow. It's more excited to watch the PGA Golf Tour on ABC. And now here comes that's more exciting, or watching paint dry or something. Why subject people to that? Come on, they've given up their time to come to this conference. They need to be challenged. They need to have somebody with passion that's going to tell them something that they need. As for me, I want to break that mold, right? That's what I call dynamic speaking. And it's important. If I'm remembering this right, there was a recent UCLA, I think it was UCLA, a recent study that found for the most effective communication, something like 57% of the message comes from your non-verbal communication. Only 36 comes from your voice. You add that up, that leaves like 7. The remaining 7% is what comes from your content. Okay, so to me, that suggests that people need to spend more time on preparing the delivery than developing great content. The content is important, but how you say it is even more. Now, to expand on that, to get to that point, I talk about what I call those 4 essential E's that you were talking about. Okay, for dynamic speaking, when I say I want to break the mold, here, this is what I'm talking about. After people have heard me speak, all right, I want them to be enriched, empowered, encouraged, and educated. Okay, those are the 4 essential E's. Now, by enriched, all right, I mean that they ought to be better off after they've heard me speak than they were before they walked into the room, whether it's a virtual room or a real room. I need to enhance their ability to perform whatever task that they want to do when they get back, or whatever task that I'm talking about in my speech. They need to be enriched, better off. All right. What was the third one? Empowered. All right. So what do I mean? Empowered. I want people to take what I've talked about and apply it in a practical way when they return to their office. I want to do more than just spoon feed them the facts. Right. I need to present my topic in a way that's going to ignite the same passion within them that I've got. I've got this passion, I've got this energy. I want to ignite that within them. I want to empower them so that they can see that they've got what it takes to succeed within themselves. They've been empowered. I have taught them something that they can then apply and use. It's like the difference between handing you you're hungry. What am I going to do? Am I going to hand you a fish, or am I going to show you how to fish? Well, if I hand you a fish, you'll eat today. If I show you how to fish, well, you'll eat for your whole life. Yeah, well, unless you don't like fish, in which case the analogy falls apart. But whatever. Moving on. All right, the fourth one. Educated. Yeah, right. Educated. That's the fourth one. By educated, what I mean is I want my audience to get it. All right, to get the knowledge that I have to impart them from my topic, but I've got to do it in a way that's going to be exciting, that's going to be visually compelling, done in a way that's going to draw them in, it's going to engage them, that involves multiple senses. All the stuff that I learned when I was an educator comes to, that all comes back to me, as I'm preparing my speeches, my talks, and so forth, and knowing that I need to draw people in. I need to involve those senses that I seek to both to resonate and to be relevant to where they are, what they're doing, where they're going. And to tie it all together, I want to be that catalyst that both challenges and propels my audience to do what it takes to push themselves to be better. That's what I want, And, I suppose with that in mind, maybe I could just add a fifth essential E. That's entertain. Okay, right? I mean, that's, if you think about it, education speaks to the mind, but I think entertainment speaks to the soul. I mean, there's no reason why you can't have some fun when you're learning something. Loosen up, man. Don't just sit there like a bump on a log or a stuffed shirt. If you're going to talk to somebody, throw a little life into the party, bring the energy, bring your A game, give it everything you've got, leave it all on the field. I learned as an educator that the more connection points you make with the people that you're trying to teach or communicate to, the more effective that communication is going to be. The greater retention there's going to be in the learning process, the more, the longer they're going to remember whatever it is that you're telling them. And that's getting back to the business of having both relevance and resonance. But I feel the only way I'm going to do it is by using those four essential E's, okay? Making sure that they are enriched, empowered, encouraged, and educated. And maybe add that fifth one, entertained.
I like that a lot. And how does that framework change, if at all, depending on the audience that we have in front of us, right? So does the framework need any adjustment if we're, let's say, in front of a audience at a virtual conference, or, whenever we get a chance to in-person conference? Does it change if we're giving a presentation to a room full of executives who we're trying to convince of our methodology?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. It does make it in the same way. Okay. Again, I draw back on my experiences as a teacher, in learning the art of teaching, of being an educator, a communicator, right, is knowing that you're not going to teach math to a fifth grader in the same way that you would to, say, calculus in college, right? They're two totally different animals. Not that I'm implying that kids are animals. Some might act like, well, whatever. But yeah, you've got executives sitting there, okay, or you've got a bunch of DBAs, or you've got data scientists, or you've got fellow educators, and I've spoken to conferences in, oh, good heavens, probably about 9 or 10 different industries. And I know that things have to pivot, things have to change. You have to take your audience into consideration. You have to take the theme of the conference. You have to take the mission, vision, and goals of the organization that's putting it on. Whether or not you're doing an opening keynote or a closing keynote, rouse everybody up and set the pace, or wrap everything, you're either rousing or you're wrapping. Okay. And I don't mean boom, ka-chicka, boom, I mean WRAP, wrapping it all up, bringing things to a close, and ending off with a bang. And yeah, it's different whether you're virtual or in person. For instance, we were talking before the session here that when we were in person, one of the things that I love to do is to take a whole bowl full of, and I keep saying Skittles, they're not Skittles. Starburst. Starburst. Thank you. I lost the word. Yeah. And what I do is I would talk about my points. Resonate. Okay. Relevance. Right. What's the second point? Resonate. Right. And when they get it right, I'd ask them to tell me, and they get it right. I'd just toss them a starburst. And one of the things that I would guarantee to conference organizers when they would ask me to speak, whether a keynote or a breakout or whatever, I would tell them, okay, look, I guarantee you that by the end of my speech, they will have my outline memorized. I guarantee it. And so it's a little more. It's a lot more challenging to do that in the virtual realm. In a way, you almost have to bring more energy into the room because people sitting there looking at a computer screen, they're used to seeing Tony Stark put on a metal suit and hit a button and he's flying. He hits the jets on his boots, and or Spider-Man picks up a car with one hand. The Hulk turns green and smashes a Chitauri spaceship. They're used to seeing all kinds of spectacular wonder on the screen, the big screen when they go to the movie, and now on their computer screen if they rent a video or whatnot. So that's a heck of a lot of entertainment to compete with. So when you don't have the benefit of the body language, the inflections, the expression of the face, the feedback, the ambiance, the vibe, the chemistry that you can have with people when you have them in the same room, and that if you've told a joke that falls flat, you can more quickly shift gears and go another route. Or you see that you've said something that might be halfway funny, 3 or 4 people are laughing, 5 or 6 others start laughing, and then you go with it. You can, I'm not saying I'm not a stand-up comedian, as you can tell, but, injecting a little humor to break the ice. Yeah, that's a bit more effective in a real in-person audience than it is in a virtual world. So again, it's more challenging. One of the things that I did was I created games to play, the online quiz maker type thing where you have multiple choice questions at the very end. I tell them, that there might have been a PDF that they would download and they can be filling it out and answering the questions that I would be reciting as we go through the outline. And then at the end, there would be like a 10-minute game. I'd ask 10 questions. Put them up on the screen, and people can, log into the game and hit the A, B, C, D, whatever. And you get more points if you answer more quickly. And at the end, whoever got the most points would win. And as the game would progress, they could see the leaderboard up on the screen. Really, it was a lot of fun. 2 or 3 conference organizers where I did this, virtual conferences, they liked it so much. They said, you know what? We're going to give out a gift card, an e-card at the end, like an Amazon, $25 Amazon card or a $10, $20 Starbucks card or something like that, or Panera Bread or whatnot. I thought that was a neat idea. I never would have thought that they did that, and so that kind of, it kind of helped make up for the fact that you don't have that interpersonal interaction in the virtual world as you do in the real world. So yeah. It is the framework still remains the same, though. You still need to enrich, empower, encourage, and educate. You're just employing different means to get to the same end.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of takeaways there. So touching back on your teaching experience. So you wrote this video that I saw on your YouTube channel. I thought it was really interesting. It was all about the madness behind the method. And it's talking about the difference between teaching, coaching, and mentoring. So I'm curious, how do you define each of these terms?
Well, there are some things that are pretty obvious. There are some subtleties that you can weave into any working definition of these types of things. But these 3 methodologies for professional development, in general, you can paint them with a broad brush. All right, teaching. Typically, I would define teaching as the art of imparting knowledge or skill. It's the giving of facts and the receiving of facts, giving and receiving of facts. Coaching, I think, is a bit more practical, providing some sort of intensive training in a specific topic or a specific sport, more like, and it tends to emphasize more the practical application, although teaching, you want to be practical as well, but the method of coaching relies more on practicality. Mentoring is more like a process than an event. The long-term gradual transferring of knowledge or experience from an older person or a more experienced person to some protege who, a younger protege.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. It's like almost a subtle difference because, if sometimes I feel like I use those words interchangeably, but me, at one point in my career, I was a teacher as well for a very short stint. But, I'm also a mentor at Data Science Dream Job, which is this giant mentorship platform. And those lines get really blurred sometimes, right? Because, teaching and mentoring, I feel like are similar, but I like the way that you've described it there. It really helps to understand the difference. So, I mean, when it comes to teaching, right, that's easy. You kind of just show up to a course or whatever and you get a teacher. Sorry, when it comes to finding a teacher, it's kind of easy in the sense that sign up for a course, get a teacher. Coaching and mentoring, I think, is a little bit harder to find the right fit for you.
There's sure. That's right, because one is more, the coaching relies more on practice and practicality, and the mentoring relies more on the process. It's like teaching is more about procedure, coaching is more about practice, and mentoring is more about process. So
yeah, and you also talk about this idea of this kind of like structural matrix for these three approaches. So you talk to us about what this is and how can we leverage each of these methods for the maximum effectiveness.
So in this structural matrix, it's that's something that I developed to kind of build a framework around which we would gauge the success or failure, the level of success that we have with our varying approaches in professional development. There's 6 components or 6 nodes. Okay. So the best way to leverage them, and I call them, there are the let's see, you got me on the emphasis, the focus, the goal, the approach, the summary, and the relationship. All right. You need to be aware of the different characteristics of each one, maintaining enough flexibility to pivot to whichever one that works best for the situation. And that's taking the personalities into account, situations, events into account. Just to give you a brief example, when we're talking about the relationship, okay, what relationship do you have? Well, with teaching, you're the pupil. With coaching, you're the player. But with mentoring, oh, fine Padawan you are. Okay. The mentor is the one who can tell you, he's your biggest cheerleader and your toughest critic all at the same time. About the only one who can come up to you and tell you, do or do not. There is no try.
I love it, man. That's it. I love that impersonation of
thank you.
I love that, man. So within this kind of framework of teaching, coaching, mentoring, you talk about these ideas of adhesion and cohesion.
Yeah.
So what do these have to do with, closing our skill gaps?
Sure. Well, okay. So I'm sure you'll recall it, because for you, high school was a little bit shorter, less time ago than, for me, it was probably about 90 years ago, as some might think, but no, I'm not that old. You recall from your high school chemistry. All right. Adhesion is defined as the force between molecules of different substances. All right. Whereas cohesion is the force between molecules of like substances, the same substance, as it were. For instance, it's the adhesion of water that makes it bead and stick to the roof of a car or the hood of a car that has just been waxed. But it's the cohesion of water that makes it stick to itself and fall as drops when it rains, right? Okay, so we got that settled, the difference between the two. Well, here's how it applies in professional development. And I'm assuming that's what we're talking about, right? The teaching, coaching, and mentoring. We're not talking about its application with crazy glue epoxy or the difference between painter's tape and duct tape. Not the same thing. And I agree. Okay. But no, in the context, seriously, in the context of professional development here, continuing the thread of teaching, coaching, and mentoring. All right. Let's see, how do I put this? When you put people with different personalities, okay, differing personalities are paired up. When the teaching, coaching, or mentoring process is done correctly, the relative strengths and weaknesses of these differing personalities will complement each other, and their adhesion brings them to new heights of success. Now, in a similar way, if you pair up like personalities together, people that are really similar, okay, well, that's going to foster some sense of camaraderie and sympathy. It's like you're saying, hey, you know what? I've been there. I know what you're going through. I think the same way about this. Yeah. And their cohesion helps them to tackle difficulties and break through barriers. So remembering those chemical properties of the elements, as it were, helps you think about the chemical properties of people. And, when we talk about the way people relate to each other, what do we call it? We call it chemistry. And so remembering those things, I believe, can be leveraged to get you from where you're at to where you want to go.
I really, really enjoyed that. Thank you so much, Dr. Joe.
Yes, sir.
How'd you find your way into the data world, coming from such a strong education background into the data world? What was the hook or the calling for you there?
To me, my hook, I like the way you say it, the calling is the fact that I realize that to me, I want to take a report. I'm not just interested in communicating the facts. I want to do it as I do in my teaching and in my communicating, I want to do it in a visually compelling way. It's the same way with using graphics to tell a story. Okay, using charts to tell a story. David McCandless said in the 2010 TED Talk that sight by far has the highest bandwidth of any of the five senses. About 80% of the information we take in is by eye. Matter of fact, research since then has proven it to be more like 90%. And it's that fascination with the neuroscience, with the process of learning, and with how we process things visually, something like 68,000 times more quickly than we do, any of the other senses. Okay, as you can, I'm really passionate about that, because the way we communicate is important. One of my data heroes, for lack of a better term, he's an account executive. He's an expert data storyteller. Name is Spencer Sobczak. The guy's amazing. He's a genius. He says data storytelling is both an art and a science. Our data visualizations are the most powerful when they find this balance. And, that's the whole point, right? When you're creating data visualizations, graphs that are based on information, your goal ought to be to make your presentation actionable, to give decision makers the insight they need to make the right decision. That really motivates me, being able to knowing how to not manipulate the data, but to categorize and summarize and aggregate the data in the ways that will lend themselves to being expressed graphically. And then combining that with the storytelling ability that I have as a teacher. Well, it was just a perfect marriage of the two. We at NC State, when I first started, we were talking data visualizations before it was a cool thing. Back in the day when it used to be all done with a program called DB4 and Fox Pro. That was before you were born, I think, maybe. But progressing from that to using newer tools. Yeah, the tools are newer. The bells and whistles are greater. The capacity of the processing power of the computers are, off the charts as far as how everything has grown exponentially beyond our wildest dreams. But, the concept's still the same. You have a message that you want to get across. And just like I talked about in speaking, and doing so in a dynamic manner and doing so in a way that does awaken the desire in somebody else to learn, that ignites the passion, as I do in my speaking, in my teaching. I found that doing this with assembling reports in a visually compelling manner to give the people the insight they need to make those decisions, or to answer those questions, or to solve those problems. That's something that I found so very appealing, and it seemed to be a wonderful combination of the love for teaching, the love for communication, and the communication doing it in a visually compelling manner.
So along your journey in your career, in your data career, I'm wondering, what are some of the delights and disasters that you've seen being made with data-driven decisions?
Yeah, this kind of goes with that topic. I mean, the delight comes when the data indeed is a thing of beauty, and it's the thing that drives the decision making. That is when organizations have gone from being in what I call data denial to being data driven in their decision making process. But when all they do is just go with their gut, all right, they're just inviting disaster. I mean, wrong decisions that were based on having wrong information, well, that's going to lead to wrong actions. Okay, it's like everybody's heard the story of how one word from a Japanese communication in 1941, specifically early December 1941, caused us to think it wasn't such a big threat. And what happened on the 7th? Boom, we got bombed. More than, 3,800 and some odd Americans were killed at the sneak attack at Pearl Harbor. Bad data, is part of that. And nobody wants that. That's the disaster I'm talking. I mean, it may not necessarily be as tragic and as drastic as, an attack that destroys a lot of battleships and costs thousands of lives, but still the disastrous results of the consequences that come about as having made these wrong decisions that were based on incorrect information. Now, people who have good intuition, on the flip side of that, they're going to tend to make right decisions. But even then, still, just going with your gut isn't always the best route to take. It's important to consider the data, whatever data you have available. And we're not, there is no shortage of data these days. The problem isn't the accumulation of data. It's the appropriate cataloging, assembling, and reporting of the data. We got plenty of data, right? So it needs to be considered when you're going about your business decisions. The information and the insight from which you're going to gain that insight, and that's the making it actionable that we were talking about, focusing on things that are going to inform their gut, right? If you think like you've got some good intuitions, you want to go with your gut, fine, go with your gut, but make sure you have informed your gut, because people that are trying to run their business, I mean, they've got to make decisions all the time, right? So when they're successful in making those decisions, that's the delight that I'm talking about. When they blow it, well, then it's a disaster. And they could have avoided that disaster by paying attention to their data.
Absolutely love that. Thank you very, very much for that, Dr. Joe.
Yes, sir.
So talk to us about, some soft skills here, because I feel like you got some great wisdom to share with the audience here, because in my experience, a lot of up and coming data scientists or data people who are new to the field, they tend to overemphasize the technical skills, thinking that that's what's going to separate them from the rest of the competition.
Yep.
What are some soft skills that candidates could really start practicing that's really going to help separate them from their competition? So maybe give me your top one soft skill that you think candidates should start practicing it, and how can they go about exercising that skill or cultivating that skill?
Well, Harp, if I were doing the hiring, the first thing that I'd want is for somebody to be dependable. All right. So I'd say dependability. I mean, no matter how good you may be at the technical stuff, at the end of the day, if the boss can't count on you to get the job done, whether he or she is looking at you or not, what good is all that high level skill? I mean, we call it soft skill, but there's nothing soft about it. I mean, yeah, we can say soft in that it's not so easily, it's ethereal in a way. It's not a thing that you can define. I today will be dependable. I today will be dedicated. It's something that's developed within your character, within your own personal integrity. For that matter, dedication to your craft, that's largely missing. I mean, a willingness to give it all when you've got a task set before you, not just be satisfied with doing the bare minimum. So yeah, we can say soft in the sense that you can't really define it by hard and fast rules. I mean, we live in a society, and I don't mean to sound unkind, and I'm not singling any people out in any way. I want to be kind, but I feel that we live in a society in which we've seen too many people with this entitlement mentality, people who think everybody owes them something. And I'm going to do, I'm just going to do just the bare minimum. I'm going to do just enough to get by and keep me from getting fired. Don't ask me to commit to a deadline. No, that's the time for that is far past. I mean, we need to be dependable. We need to be teachable. Having an attitude that says, you know what, no matter how smart I think I am, and I am pretty smart, I'm not so good that I can't learn something from somebody else who has something they want to teach me. Shoot, the common mentality is just crazy these days. I mean, let me tell you, Hart, I will take just one person with a good, solid, dependable work ethic, dedication, over 3 or 4 lazy, uncommitted, hotshot know-it-alls who think they're God's gift to society. I don't care how much smarter and more highly skilled technology-wise that they might be. There's something to be said about good, solid, down-to-earth values. And the way that looks is by being willing to start at the bottom, being willing to accept criticism, being willing to have those teachable moments where, I don't know it all and someone else can teach me something, and being willing to do more than just the bare minimum to get by. If it's worth enough to you to have it, it's worth enough to you to work for it. I mean, that's why it's called work. It should take at least some sort of effort. I mean, it's something that you love doing, then great. But have some internal, I don't know, some moral compass about you that says, I've been hired to do a job. I'm going to give it everything I've got, and I'm going to be dependable, and I'm not going to be so arrogant that I think I'm the best thing since sliced bread. I think that's the kind of the combination. I know you asked for one. I may have given you about 6 or 7, but I mean, it just boils down to that one thing is I suppose, personal integrity, because, really, if you do have that moral compass where you do say that you have been entrusted with a task and you're going to give it everything that you got and commit yourself to getting it done and keeping your word, right? If you've got that one basic thing down, then the rest of these will fall into place, in my opinion.
I absolutely love that. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Joe.
Yes,
so let's
sir.
do our last formal question before we jump into the random round.
All right.
It's 100 years in the future. What do you want to be remembered for?
Well, assuming I'm not going to be alive in 100 years because I'll be 100 and whatever. Yeah. 100 years from now, I think I want to be remembered as the guy that brightened your day, lightened your load, and heightened your senses. How's that? Whatever I say or do. All right. I want people to be better off than what they were after I was in the room when I came on the scene. I would like that to be said about me, that I'm remembered as somebody that people were better off after I was in the room. I mean, as a Christian, that has an even bigger meaning for me. I want to be remembered as somebody who put Christ as Savior first, and his family and his fellow man above himself and his own comfort. Someone who wasn't selfish. Somebody who, I guess it was obvious that he was more interested in glorifying God and being faithful to his wife and kids than he was making a big name for himself. And the big name for yourself will come if you're known as somebody that was more interested in others and helping others get ahead. I can't think of a better legacy that I could leave behind and be remembered in that way 100 years from now, when I'm probably very likely will be dead and gone.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Joe. Let's go ahead and jump into the random round. First question.
Oh boy.
First question I got for you is, what are you currently reading?
Oh man, I love this. There is a series by Gilbert Morris. It's called Lions of Judah. You might call it the biblical historical fiction genre, I guess. This guy knows how to make characters come alive. And I mean, in this particular series, he brings a series of Old Testament Bible characters to life. Like, what was it like for Noah? You hear the story, Noah built the ark, gathered all the animals, blah, blah, but yet he turns this Noah guy into a real honest to goodness, true person. What was he like when he was a kid? What was it like getting the animals? What was it like with his 3 sons? Did they ever have any arguments? When did he get married? And all the stuff that we don't hear about, we don't know about. This man's got an incredible imagination. And, what was their life like? Their struggles, their families, that they had real day-to-day problems just like we do. And they had real day-to-day victories like we do. Making these characters come to life. I mean, very, very compelling series. I start reading and I just can't put it down. So the one I'm on now is the one on Noah, called Heart of a Lion. But yeah, Lions of Judah series, Gilbert Morris.
What song do you currently have on repeat?
Oh, man. I am really into the Southern gospel genre. It's like a cross between Christian and country, sort of. Real peppy stuff. Anyway, the one song in particular is called Put Out the Fire by a group called Greater Vision. It's nice, upbeat, inspiring, and puts a smile on your face.
So, random question generator. Do a couple questions here.
Okay.
First question, who are some of your heroes?
Some of my heroes. Well, in the data world, I talked about Spencer Sobczak, Scott Taylor, the data whisperer, Susan Walsh.
Nice.
Harp.
Good friends of mine.
Yeah. You're a bit of a hero yourself, and
thank you.
In the data world, I won't get into politics, but I think about those in the past will be like Winston Churchill. Failure is, let's see, what is it? Victory is not forever. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Winston Churchill. So he's a hero. Teddy Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, for figures of the past. And in the speaking world, I would say philosophically, people like Simon Sinek that have some very, oh my goodness, some really really heart stirring things that that kind of get you to think. In historical figures in the Christian world, I would say great preachers of the old, like Charles Haddon Spurgeon, Billy Sunday. In today's world, speakers like David Jeremiah, and others that are just really, really faithful to their families, faithful to their calling. And, whether you believe their message or not, you got to admire somebody who will stand up in the face of adversity and do whatever it takes to get their job done. I mean, that's something you can admire in anybody. I guess, we talk about heroes, and what is the definition of a hero, right? Is it a person that puts on a cape and can bust through walls with her bare hands? No, it's a hero is somebody who stands tall and does right, no matter what the odds are against her or him. The people who are on the front lines battling COVID, the researchers that are trying to figure out the best way to, have these vaccines, which are now, thankfully, millions of people have been vaccinated, thank goodness. But the firefighters, the police, the teachers that are standing up and teaching kids and working long hours and not getting paid any extra for the hundreds and hundreds and thousands of papers that they have to grade and the stuff they have to put up with, and the love that they have for their kids, whether it's returned or not. That give and give and give without expecting. I mean, they get a paycheck, but nowhere nearly as much as they should get paid. People, those types of things, without naming a specific individual, I suppose that is a heroic thing. To me, that's the true definition of a hero. Somebody who stands up, does what's right, loves with all their heart, doesn't expect anything in return, and makes the world a better place to live in. That's a hero to me.
Awesome. So when people come to you for help, what do they usually want help with?
Let's see. How to tie a tie. No, that's my son. Yeah. Typically with what's the best way to report on these particular data points. I've got 4 or 5 tables that I'm trying to build, and I want to make sure that, should I be normalizing them or denormalizing them? I've got a song that I'm putting together, and I'm not sure what chord progression to use. Should I go to F minor, or would an F do? Or if I have an F, should I go to A minor, or will a G? Yeah, that's another avenue of me we hadn't talked. Yeah, so I get questions about music from my peers that know that I'm a musician.
That's nice, man.
So
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
A real gamut. It just runs the whole gamut.
Let's do one last question from here.
Yep.
When was the last time you changed your opinion about something major?
The last time I changed my opinion about something major. Well, I can't say I used to hate corn on the cob, and I love it now. I wouldn't call it. If you're in the South, that's a major thing. Okay. I did not like corn on the cob growing up. Changed my mind. I can't get enough of it now. So, but that's not of any consequence in the world. That is a major thing if you're living in the South. I would say how I felt about China. Again, I don't want to get into any political things, but in differentiating between the Chinese people and the Chinese government, and always against the philosophy of communism and against the repressive regime that will take an idea that may sound nice for some people, equality and all this kind of thing, but with the terrible repressive regime that has crushed its people and so forth, separating that and thinking that everybody who is a Chinese official is out to kill their people, when that's not true, that there are some good people that are just stuck in a bad situation. Yeah. That's one thing that I like to try to keep. If there is not to paint everything with such a broad brush. Yeah. I guess that's one thing that I've come around to thinking differently about.
I like that a lot. So, Dr. Joe, how can people connect with you, and where can they find you online?
So the best way to find me online is through LinkedIn at, of course, linkedin.com/IN/JWPEREZ. They can also, if you want to see my itinerary, where I'm speaking, what my topics are, if you're interested in, you need a speaker, not that I'm going to give a shameless plug or anything, but you did ask. But anyway, the speaking topics, my portfolio, the places where I'm going to be speaking or have spoken, you can find that at sessionize.com. That's the word session with IZE on the end, sessionize.com/Joe-Perez, Perez, and my website, drjoeperez.com.
I'll be sure to link to all those right there in the show notes. Dr. Joe, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come on to the show today. Appreciate having you here.
Absolutely, Harp. It's been my honor and pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on your program, sir.
Thank you.